So our last real presentation of the day is we want to show you a bit of the roadmap that's coming. The roadmap is also part of the GitHub page that we try to keep updated as much as we can, but sometimes we slip a bit there. So please remind us if we are lagging behind there. But we just want to give you a sneak preview in what we have on the roadmap and what is coming. And like we said earlier, really the community is really important for us. So if you have certain features that you think are valuable and there are multiple people agreeing with that, and we can prioritize those features as well. So this is just what we are thinking about at the moment. So what is coming in the 6.4.1 release? So the current plan is to do the 6.4.1 release at the beginning of December. And the bigger features of that are quite a number of CMMN engine improvements. So we did quite a bit to add some additional flexibility there, to have listeners on different levels so that you can plug in your own custom code on a lot of different levels in the CMMN engine. The process instance migration improvements that we just talked about are coming in 6.4.1. And activity instance runtime data, where Martin, who is also here, is currently working on, is also coming in 6.4.1. And that is the main reason for that, is that if you have runtime process instances and you want to get an overview of all the activities that were executed for that process instance, you have to go to the history tables. And if your history tables are full of data, that can be quite a slow query, or at least it's not as performant as it should be maybe. So what we are doing now is add an additional table called activity instance. And it's actually the same thing as the historic activity instance, but it is kept during the whole life cycle of the runtime state of a process instance. So you only have to go to the runtime tables if the process instance is running. So it gives you a bit more flexibility and a bit more performance queries to search on the data. Then after that, 6.5.0 is coming, of course. We don't have a date for that yet, but typically we have a kind of 3-month release cycle for these kind of things. And one of the bigger features, where Ivo, who is also here, will spend most of his time on, I think, is DMN DRD. And that's basically adding an additional layer of having more logic in the DMN engine. So currently, if you use the DMN engine, it's executing a single decision table, and you get the outcome back directly. But DRD gives you the option to say, actually, as part of this calculation, I don't have one decision table, but I have 3 decision tables. And I first need to execute decision table 1 and 2 to calculate the outcome for decision table 3. There's also the option to use an expression or call a piece of Java logic, do a piece of scripting logic as part of this. So it makes the whole DMN calculation stuff a lot more advanced, basically. So you don't have one layer anymore, you have multiple layers, and you can calculate more complex things there. And what that really means is that we will have a DRD editor in the Flowable modeler. It basically looks a bit similar as BPMN, but it's more like a tree of elements, because in the end you want to calculate a certain outcome, which is typically done by a certain decision table, and you have other elements as inputs for that decision table. And in addition to that, there's of course also a DRD runtime execution in the DMN engine, which we will also be adding to that. Yeah.
Is this also based on the standard?
Yeah. So DRD is part of the DMN specification. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so actually what I was already saying, so continuing the effort of process instance migration version 1, adding batch migration support, adding option to migrate on process deployment, doing a couple of more complex migrations, also based on hopefully some community feedback about stuff that we don't support yet, doing conditional migrations, that kind of more advanced use cases. Okay.
All right, so this is also something that came up during the lunch discussions a few times, is that many people today already use or put a message onto a queue, message queue typically, and then have a process that waits for something to come back. Currently, we often, well, you can just write it in a service task, right, and just do that. But there are some problems with that, namely, if your message queue is really, really fast, you put out a message, that queue immediately comes back, and then what? And that's also why we often say, if you see those questions on the forum, we often say use, for example, camel to solve that kind of race condition you have there. Now, we have, over the last month, 2 months probably, we have added some low-level features to kind of solve this problem. So we have added, if you look at the runtime service, there are kind of new methods that when you send out a message and you get that message back from a message queue, to make sure that that if you still have something running, the process instance still running, that doesn't, is not trying to do something and running still not yet committed process instance. What we want to do is actually remove the need to have camel or mule there for these kind of use cases. If you're using Spring, then we will use the default things that are in Spring. But most importantly, that's the, let's say, the easy part. I mean, the easy part is writing the service task. The hard part is already done in the sense that the engines already know how to handle this in a way that is guaranteed not to screw up your process. You might have to try it out, right? You can now do it with a service task and a receive task, but you can easily get into race condition there. So that's what we have been solving, and now we need to put the cherry on the cake there. Of course, when you talk about messaging, you often talk about correlation. That means correlation in this sense means that you get a message back and it has some data. How do you correlate that with a particular instance, right? And that's something we want to add there with of course, some pluggability that you can hook in your own classes that to correlate your own stuff and stuff, and or have some default things based on variable values, for example, stuff like that. Now the hard work is done, and now we need to finish it pretty much. I think I mentioned this already this morning in my presentation about MongoDB. The goal is definitely to add and enhance the current implementation with more coverage, to make that test suite run against the MongoDB implementation, and then waiting on or seeing if the community people are using it, people find issues with it, and then take it further. Right? As the question this morning was, it's really going to be depending on who's using it for what. Community support is also something we hear a lot. Actually, we have a prototype which is like 90%, if not 99% ready, that we've done as an internal Flowable hackathon a while ago. That's pretty much what we did there. And I'm not an expert in Kubernetes, but basically, it has things like Helm charts, which means that you can just configure it and boot up the whole thing with all the UIs, with all the engines. Say I want to have that many instances of the engine, that many instances of the admin, and all that in a way that works on any Kubernetes kind of environment. Another thing we often hear requests for is kind of like showing the information, what they call like a heat map, showing information on the screen that shows either it being duration, being it like average time spent, how many times a certain step was hit. I mean, the data is all there in the database for ages now. This is just a way to visualize that nicely for the people. And that's something we plan to add, as I saying, in the 6.5 release. We're currently not yet started writing, but we're thinking about a book. As we felt, also discussions here again today, as we felt that we're not necessarily lacking, so to say, in the technical kind of area. We have a lot of documentation examples, really in the technical area about how to do certain things. Of course, contributions are always welcome for more. But I think what is for us, as has been shown in the last couple of hours, is that for us these three, let's say, the holy three, and how these work together, how BPMN works together with CMN, how DMN works together, and how these interconnect, and why Flowable is the best choice to actually work with these three together. That's really something where we think there is material needed, and the best probable way is not is something like a book. We're talking at the moment with Manning to do something, but if that if that doesn't fall, if that doesn't go through, we might have other angles we might want to try. We definitely the point here is that we definitely want to put out something because we feel there's a need to show the world, as we were talking today, like how to use these in combination. We have all the technology, we have all the engines right now, but now we need to show the world how to actually work with them. We mentioned it a couple of times already. Everything that we showed here is up to debate, and if you think you've got a better idea, you can convince people in the community, feel free to do it. Also very important that contributions can be done at various levels. I mean, we've got many people here in the audience that have done contributions one way or the other. We have people that have been adding unit tests, simply saying, okay, we've got a unit test, it fails, I don't know why, but it fails. This is, looking at you right now, this is definitely helpful for us because it saves us time to reproduce the error, and we often know exactly, okay, yeah, it's going to be here, so let's fix it. Documentation changes, meaning we have a couple of people here that have done documentation changes. That's for us, we're not reading those documentations like every day or even every week, right? And for us, things are natural because we are in this world every single hour. And we kind of miss these things, which might, for people not being in this world every hour, be kind of missing. And every contribution in documentation is welcome. Forum helping people on the forum or posting things on the forum is always helpful. So don't think that contributions means code only. I mean, for open source project, all the other things are as important, if not sometimes more important, because if you don't have documentation, you simply don't exist. You can have the best code in the world. If you do not describe how to use it, pretty much your code does not exist. So it's really important. I think I pretty much said everything there, Des. And then I think 10 minutes before the end of the day, we can open up for any questions, feedback, or remarks. So thank you very much.